broadcasting.
Blog Talk USA. Are you tired of waiting for change?
1012, and it gives me 1,250 feet. Exit.
Announced the arrival of the flight from Los Angeles and Chicago.
Explosion.
Welcome to the Tuesday, March 22nd edition of T&Z Talk. I'll remind you, if you want to join us on air at any time, 347-855-8118. That's 347-855-8118. We have a full menu of things to discuss today. The presidents in Cuba, the terror in Brussels, the terror attack in Brussels, the primaries that are happening today, the ongoing dispute with Donald Trump, the ridiculousness of his comments with the Washington Post editorial board, his foreign policy advisor team, and my partner, Richard Zombeck, who is the Z in T&Z Talk. My friend, my partner, my cohort, Professor. How are you this morning?
That's a long list of stuff to get to, isn't it? I mean, if we had to cover every ridiculous comment that Donald Trump made in the Washington Post, we'd be screwed.
Which is why we're not doing it.
Oh boy, it just keeps getting better.
We will be doing some today and some tomorrow, and you know, it'll be interesting if Donald Trump ends up doing well today in the primary states. And he's expected to win Arizona. He is not expected to win Utah. In fact, he's expected to come in last. But Utah is so insignificant. I hate to say that because it looks like Bernie Sanders will win Utah today, but it won't matter because it's really just insignificant. But we'll get to all that. We really should, though, start with the terror attack in Brussels. And I did grab some audio from early this morning, and it has changed. Unfortunately, the death count has changed radically since I posted that. But let's see how the day began for those of us that were up at 3 a.m.
Dean, who is covering a lot of the ISIS and terror infiltration for us. Eamon, can you jump in here and give us some insight as to possibly what's happening in Belgium?
Yeah, good morning to you. Let me actually just pick up where Alistair left off there and pose a question to Alistair McDonald, who I understand we have on the phone. Alistair, can you give us a sense right now? I know that you were saying, if you can, that the city feels very much under siege. Give us a sense of where you are right now and what you're seeing. We'll start from there.
Well, I'm sitting in the Reuters bureau with a lot of people very busy trying to cover many angles of the story. But I'm looking out on the street. It's quieter than normal. It's the mid-morning in a busy commercial area, but there are relatively few people out. There's not much traffic.
And I understand, have you gotten any information yet from the European Union in terms of some of the institutions in and around the subway stations that were in downtown Brussels that may have been shut down as a result of at least this one explosion that we're hearing at the Malbec station?
Well, the Commission, which is runs the main civil service, the executive, has told people to stay in their offices or to stay at home. Although we are being told that people in Parliament, which is also close to there, are still working. But people are basically not going out on the streets.
Okay, and can we just recap real quick for some of our viewers, Alistair, in terms of what you're reporting, how many specific explosions have we now confirmed from Belgian authorities have taken place this morning?
Well, there seem to be two sites, a double explosion and possibly shooting at the airport, and an explosion on a metro in the the eastern part of Brussels, or near the European institutions.
Okay, and we are now getting confirmation as well that mass transit systems, including the buses, the trams, obviously the subway system, also has all been shut down. Is that correct?
It is all shut down, yeah.
Okay, and have we gotten any confirmation on the number of fatalities?
We have relatively firm reports of 13 dead at the airport, but again, the authorities are not being very forthcoming. We've just had a report on one broadcaster only saying that there were 10 killed in the attack on the metro, but that's just one report for the time being.
So
and now
that
they're
was
saying,
at what time?
That was at a little after 3 a.m. They're now saying 31 are dead and dozens injured, but they're not really giving us a number for those that are injured.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, as of right now, too, there's really no. I mean, I heard this morning one of the newscasters over there was speculating that this might have been one of the guys from the attack in Paris, the one that actually changed his mind and didn't set off his bomb, and that as a result of the investigation in Paris, they had found DNA of that guy, and that they were looking for him. And one person on the news was speculating that that's the reason he set off a bomb in Belgium, was he was going to get caught. He panicked and he did this. So I don't know if that's wild speculation or educated speculation, but I heard that about 15 minutes ago while I was getting ready to get on here.
Well, I listened to Richard Engel on MSNBC, who is their, I don't know, he's their chief war correspondent, whatever the hell he is. But I have a lot of respect for him. Actually. Yeah, he is fantastic. A lot of respect for him. And he walked through a scenario that was fascinating, that they had a name which led to another name, which has led to the names of 35 different people. And, of course, they are investigating. The U.S. Just happened to have some Homeland Security people in Brussels this morning. And so they jumped right in. And it really does bring up an interesting scenario with regard to our presidential candidates and how they are responding to this morning. And we can talk about that in a bit. But, Z, certainly as a person, as a citizen of a country where I understand the safeguards that we've put in place, and certainly remembering September 11th, 2001, I'm grateful for where I live, but it does underscore the reality that no matter where you live, terror can strike at any moment, as we saw in San Bernardino, and unfortunately, this false, I think, sense of security that I have, although it's very strong, what happened in Brussels, what happened in Paris are reminders that no one really is safe.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I have family. My mother's brother is in Belgium. Actually, he's not in. It was an odd comment to make. He is from Belgium. He lives in Belgium. He is on vacation in South Africa with his family this week. So he's not there today, but Belgium's pretty small, Tony. Yeah, this affects a lot of people. I mean, this kind of stuff is, it's scary, and like you alluded to, the candidates' reaction to this already is starting to play out, and frankly, I'm not really liking what I see, particularly, as usual, from the right.
Well, John Kasich was just on MSNBC, and he had to take a shot at Donald Trump. Now, I understand why he does it, but it's not about Donald Trump, and Governor Kasich should understand that. And yet, he had to really, that was the centerpiece of his comments, where he basically said, this is why we don't need somebody in the Oval Office that has no experience dealing with foreign policy. Well, who else would he be talking about?
Right. Well, usually when they say things like that, they're talking about Obama. At least this time they're talking about, Donald Trump. I mean, I'll give him that. I agree with you 100%. But, this is what they do, Tony. They're constantly running. They're running all the time, and they've got to knock the other guy, particularly the guy that's ahead right now, who is, promoting waterboarding, closing the borders, and banning 1.6 billion Muslims from entering the country, and throwing out the ones, internment camps and, all kinds of stuff. So, this is what we're dealing with right now. And, was it, I don't know, was it a good use of airtime? Who knows? I guess the point has to be made that, this idiot's not going to have the right solution. But to his followers, he does.
Well, interestingly, as we take a look at the way this is unfolding in the media, and what happened this morning in Brussels, and as we learn more and more about what is going on, and it's not a lot at this point, it is clear that there is a very real threat to the global population, and it needs to be addressed in a more proactive way. And as much as I appreciate the president of France saying that we are at war, as much as I appreciate the premier of Brussels, of Belgium, and his remarks this morning, action is what's needed. And, is this ISIS? Don't know. Is it terror? Absolutely do know. And it is just unconscionable that we continue to see these kind of attacks. What I find disturbing is, with all the technology, Z, that we have out there, how do we not know? How are we not given a heads up that something like this is going to happen, especially if there are 30-something people involved in the planning of something like this? How does the intelligence fail us? And I'm not certainly placing this on the United States, but certainly the international community has many of the same resources, if not better resources, than the United States.
Well, a lot of this, oddly enough, a lot of this boils down to encryption and privacy, and the ability for these guys to communicate with the encryption levels and the apps that are out there that immediately delete posts and things like that. So it's a very complicated issue when it comes to that. And I agree with you that in terms of, we have all this technology, but remember, they do too, right? I mean, you look at Anonymous and organizations like that use the dark web to communicate, that aren't being found, that aren't able to be traced. For as much technology as there is to find this, there's as much technology on the other end to not be found, if you know what you're doing. So, I spent a lot of time working in technology. I've never gotten into that area of it because I'm lazy. So I always kind of figure, well, if someone's watching what I'm doing, have fun, right? Because whatever. But there's a lot of technology to counteract the technology. So, this is kind of where we are right now, and tracking these guys is not easy.
Well, they're now claiming that officially there are, according to the one of the Belgian ministers, 55 wounded, 15 confirmed dead. Although all of the news media is reporting 31 killed in total, and so there is a little discrepancy between those two numbers. Of course, I would hope that the smaller number would be true, but we'll have to wait and see how this plays out. World leaders, of course, are reacting in the appropriate way. But we need to figure out a way to stop this kind of nonsense from happening to begin with. And as we have more information, we'll bring it to you throughout the hour that we're here today. See, as you're well aware, the president is in Cuba in what was yesterday a very sometimes odd, if not contentious, press conference with the two presidents, Raul Castro and President Barack Obama. I'm sure you've seen online the the odd handshake that didn't happen, where Castro lifted a very limp Barack Obama arm, and still waiting for some kind of response from the White House on that. But beyond that, it was clear that that Castro was not used to dealing with the media. Certainly, Andrea Mitchell had her moment in the sun, which he did not enjoy very much. But I thought the president's remarks were spot on. And as we speak, he is speaking in Havana, and it's my understanding he's supposed to be addressing, amongst other things, human rights violations and dissidents in Cuba. But we're on air, impossible to do the show and to listen to the president's remarks. But, certainly this is an important visit by President Obama, in spite of the fact that, again, the Republican presidential candidates are criticizing him for it. I think ultimately normalizing relationship with Cuba is ultimately going to work well for the people of Cuba, if not for the economy on both sides of the pond, if you will.
Well, and I thought it was interesting that you had basically a dictator who is not used to answering questions from the press and expected to give an answer. One of the first questions out of the mouths of one reporter was about political prisoners, and it was clear that Castro was not prepared for that question, and his response was, "Well, I don't know what you're talking about, and if you want to send me a list, we'll release them today." And The Hill came out with a quick story afterwards that, in fact, we have given them a list several times of political prisoners, and Castro denied that Cuba had taken or even takes political prisoners, and made it clear that his definition it made it clear that his definition of human rights was very different than Obama's, and he made it clear also. Not only that, but on Sunday, Cuban authorities arrested more than 24 dissidents who were protesting in Havana just hours before Obama got there. So, he gets this question from the reporter. He whiffs on it completely, and his response is, "Hey, give me a list and I'll release them this afternoon." And the United States has given him lists of political prisoners that they wanted released, and so that was kind of an odd, I'd say, uncomfortable moment in the press conference.
No question. Well, it was interesting as I was looking at audio this morning, or looking for audio this morning. I did stumble across the ABC affiliate in Miami, where, of course, there's a large concentration of, we'll call them Cuban Americans at this point. I got to tell you, my old friend Paul Waldman, who writes a daily column in the Washington Post, and he gathers tidbits from the news of the day, wrote this morning, and I'm paraphrasing, Marco Rubio, of course, is enraged with President Obama, and of course he had to tell the only guy that would listen, which was the guy that delivered his pizza for dinner last night. I thought that was rather funny. But let's listen to the CBS affiliate in Miami report, and it's just part of the report, but the report that they had from a reporter that was in Havana yesterday.
president shaking hands with the president of Cuba in their island nation. This meeting with Raul Castro now marking a new chapter in U.S.-Cuba relations. We have CBS 4 News' extensive coverage of the president's historic visit to Cuba. The president pledging that change will happen in Cuba and saying that he will listen to its people.
Our own Elliot Rodriguez is in Havana. He joins us now. Elliot, can you give us some of your perspective?
Well, Walter and Vanessa, I can tell you that on my way here to the CNN bureau in Old Havana, we went through the streets of the city and we saw people lining up. They were excited and they could not wait for the opportunity to see President Obama's motorcade coming from the U.S. diplomatic residence to the Palace of the Revolution, where he is meeting right now with Raul Castro. I haven't talked to a single person here who says this is a bad idea, who thinks that this will not be positive for Cuba. Even many of the dissidents that I've talked to have said that changes are needed on this island, but they see this as a golden opportunity for some of those changes to happen. They acknowledge these are not going to be quick changes, but it's going to take a while. President Obama right now is meeting with Raul Castro, but earlier this morning, he began his day with a ceremony at a memorial for Cuban patriot Jose Marti. The president was accompanied by Cuban officials, and everyone stood at attention as the U.S. and Cuban national anthems were played. At one point, the president laid a wreath at the Jose Marti Memorial. He then headed to the Palace of the Revolution, where he met with Cuban leader Raul Castro. The two leaders exchanged pleasantries, and through an interpreter, Mr. Obama told Castro his family enjoyed their tour of Old Havana last night, despite the rain that fell. The president arrived yesterday late afternoon, approximately 4:45, and a drizzle fell. Then it rained heavier. The first family then enjoyed a dinner last night at a privately owned restaurant. They're called Paladars here in Cuba. Paladares, these are privately owned small businesses. And let me tell you, that is a major focus of the president's initiative and the visit, promoting private enterprise here on this island.
You know, Z, imagine just for a minute owning a little restaurant in Havana and you get a call from Secret Service that the president's going to come for dinner. I almost would want to say, and I've owned 3 restaurants, thank you, but no thank you, but it has to be exciting.
Thank you, but no thank you. You know, this is a little, well, it's not completely off topic, but, you know, Ted Cruz is completely against this relationship. And when I was reading through the news yesterday, I found out probably why is because there are people in Cuba who knew his dad, and his dad claims, you know, to have been a revolutionary and all kinds of things. And stories are starting to come out about people that knew his dad, that his stories and Ted Cruz's stories about his father aren't quite lining up the way he would like them to. So, you know, this isn't working in Teddy's, in Rafael Eduardo Cruz's best interests here. So all of this should be interesting. The Rubio family, the Cruz family, all have history there. So we'll see how that plays out.
You know, interestingly, and I know you're aware of this, but for those in the audience that aren't, there have been a plethora of reports that Ted Cruz's papa is a thug, that he really has roughed up a lot of people, has a horrible reputation, has a horrible temper. Even some reports that he's an alcoholic and is really very detrimental to those around him when he is drinking heavily. And whether all of that is true or not, or any of it is true or not, is beyond me. But, you know, some reputable sources have reported this. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, while we're talking about international things, there are a couple things I want to bring up that I think are there. They may not be precisely relevant to this conversation, but in an international perspective, they're pretty highly relevant. Is one,
please, and let me just interrupt you for a moment. I want to hear it, but after you're done with that, I'd really like you to weigh in on the president's trip to Cuba. But go ahead and talk about what it is you wanted to mention.
Well, the vote from the primary voting from Americans living abroad came in yesterday on the Democratic side, and it's got Bernie Sanders at 69% to Hillary Clinton's 31%, with 5 more delegates from Americans living abroad going to Bernie Sanders. And that to me says a lot about people living in other countries and how they're seeing other countries live, particularly in places like New Zealand, Australia, France, Sweden, Denmark, and all the other, quote unquote, civilized countries that have healthcare and parliaments and democracies, and the way they're viewing Bernie Sanders from an international perspective and living in other countries that have things that we don't have. Also, going back to Donald Trump and ISIS and terrorism, the Economist's intelligence unit every year or every so often does a rating of global threats, and Donald Trump becoming president actually has a rating of 12 in a global risk, which is the same level of risk of a rising threat of jihadi terrorism destabilizing the global economy. So Donald Trump actually made it on the top the list of top incidents that would present a global risk if that were to happen. Along with another Cold War. So there you go.
All right, now weigh in on your thoughts on the president's trip to Cuba, please.
Well, I think this is another step in the right direction that the Obama administration has taken. I mean, this has gone on too long, and to open these borders up and to allow this kind of stuff. I mean, I thought he played it very well. I think there was a lot of things. There were a lot of instances during his visit that he did that are getting press attention, that the underlying meaning behind it are not really going to bear fruit for another few days when this is all being examined. I think the right is going to see him as weak. I think we're going to hear a lot about that. I think we're going to hear that this was a big mistake, that he didn't even blah, blah, blah. He didn't do one thing or he did too much of something else. And it's basically going to be more juvenile antics from the right. As far as, what his visit represents, Tony, I mean, we're going to have to wait and see. But I thought, this is another step in the right direction on the part of President Obama.
Now, and obviously, based on my comments earlier, I couldn't agree more. The president's done with his remarks in Cuba this morning, and he did, during his remarks, say that the United States will give all its resources to the Belgian people to find out who did this and bring them to justice, and that is the latest update. Listen, yesterday was an odd day in a lot of ways. All but one candidate spoke to the AIPAC conference, and for those that aren't familiar with AIPAC, it's a Jewish support organization that has done some incredible political work. They are divided between Democrats and Republicans. The vast majority of AIPAC members are Democrats, and so when Hillary Clinton spoke yesterday morning, she was more than well received, which comes as no surprise. But John Kasich, Donald Trump, and Ted Cruz also spoke at the AIPAC conference. I don't know if you saw, Z, any of their remarks. I did not see John Kasich's, although I read about it. I did see Donald Trump and Ted Cruz's remarks to AIPAC, and Ted Cruz just confused the hell out of me, understanding the purpose of AIPAC and what they do. Pandering, which is something that Trump and Cruz did, in my opinion. Kasich not as much. But it was an astounding demonstration of ass-kissing like I've never seen before.
Yeah, with the exception of Bernie Sanders, who addressed them from Utah. Donald Trump, I was watching Donald Trump, and first of all, it was a way that I've never seen Donald Trump before. First of all,
hold on. Bernie Sanders did not address them from Utah. They wouldn't allow him to. He sent his written remarks that were put on record. And he did do a live interview on MSNBC and on CNN remotely, but they would not accept his remarks except in writing.
Okay. Well, then I'm mistaken. I was under the impression that he was he did make some comments. So I apologize.
He did. They just wouldn't let him do it remotely. By the way, I do have an update. They're now saying there are 212 people wounded and confirming 31 dead in Brussels.
Oh.
Anyway,
it's going to be a long day.
It's going to be a long day. Again, going back to the AIPAC conference yesterday, just odd. I mean, both Donald Trump and Ted Cruz mentioned moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. Again, it was just really a masterclass in ass-kissing.
Well, and Trump just looked like he was obviously reading off a teleprompter, but he looked like he was reading off a teleprompter. He was, aside from the occasional, believe me, you can believe me that's what's going to happen. I mean, I don't know what that means. And aside from we're going to deal with them however we need to, that's typical of the way he does this stuff. He's a bully. And I was kind of surprised that he got the reaction that he did from the crowd. I know over 100 people or a couple hundred people walked out when he first started talking. Not a lot of cameras moved to that, at least in the broadcast that I was watching. But my impression, Tony, is that his insecurities were showing, and they were showing badly.
I have to agree with that. I think that is as well true in his Washington Post editorial board meeting yesterday. I read the transcript as opposed to watching the video because I read a little faster than I can watch, but without fast forwarding, and just odd behavior, refusing to answer questions, being asked the same question in multiple different ways, and yet totally ignoring the question. And it is, it was just, again, an amazing act of Trumpism. Let's just call it a Trumpism at this point. And it looks like it's actually, the acorn doesn't fall far from the tree. Donald Trump Jr. did an interview yesterday, which we're going to play here in a moment. And I think that the perspective of the Trump camp and the Trump family is astounding based on what I think is the reality. I mean, we've watched this guy for 9-10 months now, and everybody in the world is convinced that he would be a complete disaster, not just for the country, Z, but as you've posted repeatedly, for the world.
Yeah. And actually the interview that you're referring to is an interview from the circus, which is on Showtime on Sunday nights. It's the two guys that are from Bloomberg TV that's now airing on MSNBC called With All Due Respect. Their two names elude me right now. Heilman and Halperin, and I can't remember their first names. I'm sorry. John Heilman and Mark Halperin. And John Heilman is in this particular segment is in a bar after an event talking with Donald Trump Jr. And maybe we should just play the clip.
All right.
So I want to ask you about hope.
Yes.
We went from 17, now we're down to 3.
Yes.
Those other two guys have a chance still?
Strange things happen, but I mean, I don't think so.
What's keeping hope alive for them, do you think?
Probably ego. Like I said, I've been a politician now for 3 weeks, but I don't get it from their perspective. Perhaps I'm much more pragmatic than the average politician.
He wants these two guys out, right? He wants to be able to focus on the general.
He wants to win.
Right, and he wants to eliminate.
And the same people that say he can't beat Hillary,
right,
are the same people that said he has zero chance of ever doing anything. I think the faster you can focus on the real prize, the better. Like any business dealer. We've competed against the best across various industries.
Right.
We're just very good at what we do.
Right.
And so much of that really just stems from my father. He's got innate understanding of things. He understands, how to adapt along the way. I mean, he's been in this game for 6 months now, dominating people who've made careers of it, and it's just all intuition. Those people, that have been the most neglected, the blue-collar people that built this country, that made this country so great, it's almost ridiculous. The people that have done it all, they're the only ones that don't get a voice anymore. They're the only ones that get special protections, and they're the ones coming out, and the passion is real. I mean, he understands people. I mean, he's a very blue-collar guy in his own respect. He's a blue-collar billionaire. Hundreds of people have come up to me. I haven't voted in 30 years, or I've never voted. I'm 60. It's almost mind-boggling. They're vested. And if, you pull this away from them, under the guys, I mean, we've seen it from the guys in the RNC on TV yesterday. Well, it's not really the people's decision. The RNC makes the decision. You're going to have a serious, serious problem.
That was really some of the weirdest comments. I mean, Politico already studied Donald Trump Sr.'s 4 hours of interviews and events and everything else like that, and determined that he lied every 5 minutes. But I mean, two things really stand out. Is one, I want to know where these people are who are 40, 50, and 60 who have never voted before, who are coming out to vote for Donald Trump, because they continue to say this. And very interesting that he talks about other people's egos, and then 3 seconds later manages to say, well, because my father's so smart and we're really good at what we do and we're just awesome.
Well, interestingly, during that interview, he says, I've only been a politician for 3 weeks now. How is he a politician?
Yeah, exactly. I know. I was thinking the same thing, and I think it was in one of my, my list of 3 things to make a point about, and that was definitely one of them, because it's like, who the hell are you? I mean, how did he become part of this?
Yeah, great question. Bernie Sanders also spent some time on the circus, and we'll come back to Donald Trump in a moment. But since we're focusing on the circus, we've got a couple pieces of audio on Bernie Sanders. We'll comment between them.
You don't seem tired at all. I don't really understand that. How is it that you're not exhausted?
When
you get out here and do this.
When you're 36 years of age, it's not that hard, John. I mean, older people like yourself, I understand that. I'm not unsympathetic.
I'm falling apart, and you're up there like cranking it out every day. So you guys had pretty high hopes going into Tuesday's contest, right? And you got beaten 5.
No, wait a second. What you guys always do is talk about these things as a winner-take-all thing. This is not. We lost Illinois by 1 or 2 delegates. Missouri, I don't know, by less or something like that. So, in fact, what we showed in Illinois and in Missouri that we do have strength. That what happened in Michigan was not a fluke.
Is it discouraging to you at all?
Hey, when we started this campaign, I was at 3% in the polls. We had none to them. We were 70 points behind. Right. Why would I be discouraged? Right. Would I have rather won all 5 states by landslide victories? Sure. Trust me, I would have.
And this is what continues to happen. Well, and this is what continues to happen with Bernie Sanders, right? I mean, Tony, I got the numbers completely wrong yesterday because according to another news report this morning, the Seattle auditorium that he spoke in had a capacity of 20,000 people. I said that there were 30,000 people trying to get in at the event, and it's starting to look like it was more like 50,000 people that showed up for this event that only held 20,000. And he's starting to be predicted to win the next 8 states. I mean, this is, and I just find his reaction during these interviews to be incredibly refreshing. You know, I mean, how he corrects them, how the energy that he has, the demeanor that he has. He just doesn't seem worried. And in this next clip too, it's really interesting what he has to say about the way that he's changed the conversation. I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think you continue to give him a whole lot more credit than he deserves. I think his message is, and I said this weeks ago, his message is tired. It's the same message. And is it still resonating? Obviously with some people it is, but it's not with me any longer. Every time he talks, it's the same freaking conversation. We were down by 70 points. We're doing really well. I'm just tired of the same comments coming from him, and they never seem to change, ever. You and I have drastically different points of view on this. He is not doing well in the delegate count. I don't care how many people show up at his rallies. He's not going to win Arizona today. He can go ahead and win the foreign delegates. He can go ahead and win Utah. At the end of the day, Hillary Clinton will take, again, the lion's share of the delegates, and she may be able to put this thing away over the next couple of weeks. And then I'm curious how people like you are going to dialogue about this. Is this going to be she stole something? Are people going to come together and talk? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I agree with you to a certain degree, but I think the more important thing is you're understanding this as I'm saying all these people are turning out, so he's going to get the delegate vote in the nomination. I'm looking at this more as more and more people are turning out. He's changing the conversation. He's pushing Hillary further to the left. People are getting involved and becoming more aware of politics and where things stand. Now, look, I don't like what's going on in a lot of the Democrats' camps, how they're treating certain things. One of the things that we should lead into is Bill Clinton's statement the other day and how that's been going around the internet. I think that deserves some time. But that said, I'm not looking at this as like Hillary's going to steal this and the DNC is going to steal this. We know what's going to happen. The delegates are going to vote, much like they are on the Republican Party, are going to give the nomination to Hillary Clinton. That's the way it's going to go. But in the meantime, the outpouring of support, the people that want to hear his message, the message that he's giving and where he's steering the conversation is becoming increasingly important in this election. So I don't know that you and I are in as much disagreement as you're saying on this. I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I also think that this conversation is valid and needs to be had.
Well, and I do agree with that. And you and I talked really months ago about the importance of Bernie Sanders' campaign. And yeah, he didn't just pull Hillary Clinton to the left. He pushed her hard to the left and made her discuss things that she would have never discussed any other way. I'll be the first to admit that, and maybe was one of the first to admit that. And I may have even admitted it before we even began the primary season. And I couldn't be happier for the country that he has played that role. And let me make this clear. If he were the nominee, I believe he could win. I just don't believe he's going to be the nominee. Anyway, let's get to the second soundbite, and then we'll get to the Bill Clinton remarks, which were fascinating, by the way.
When you hear people, as people are now starting to do, and I'm not talking about pundits, I'm talking about people in the Democratic Party, start to appeal to you to bring this thing to a close on the basis of party unity, you say what?
What I say is that Republicans win when the turnout is low, Democrats and progressives win when the turnout is high. By competing for the votes in 50 states, by energizing people in 50 states, we are laying the groundwork for a high voter turnout. We are bringing millions of people into the political process who might not have otherwise been in.
When we've talked before about your reasons for getting into this race, you talked about wanting to, that running for president was the only way to make some of these issues that you really care about central to the American political discourse. I think we would agree that you've done that, correct?
Yes.
You have pushed Secretary Clinton to the left on a lot of issues. You could say this cynically, but she is now further in the progressive direction on the record than she was when this campaign started.
Yes.
Right? You have energized millions of new voters, young voters, who now this will be their first experience in politics through you. So, if you come up short, if you don't get the Democratic nomination, will this endeavor have been a success on those terms?
So, yes, all of this campaign, I think, has done a lot to transform American politics, and I'm proud of that. All of those ideas now cannot be dismissed. Right. All right? Am I proud of that? Sure I am. But that is not to say that we're not in this thing to win.
So there's nothing about this at this point, people talk about Don Quixote, who's both a figure of delusion and also a figure of romance, right? There's nothing quixotic about this. You don't, when you hear that description to where you are now, does that ring at all true to you?
No. We are we're taking on one of the best known people in the world who has the most powerful political organization, who has the entire establishment behind her. Believe me, I knew that when we got into this is not going to be a cakewalk. This is going to be a tough fight. I'm enormously proud of the campaign that we have run. And if you had followed me along the rope line, what you would have heard people say, thank you. Thank you for giving us hope. Thank you for expressing my views. Keep fighting.
I yield the floor to the distinguished gentleman from Michigan.
Well, I couldn't agree more, especially with the last 20 seconds of that interview. He has given many people hope. You and I, very early on in this campaign, and we're talking last October, maybe even September, when you were much more of a skeptic and were a little bit raked over the coals by a caller one day. And, you said something at the end of that call, I hope I'm wrong. Well, you were. And I say that in the most respectful way. What Bernie Sanders has done, the magic that he has created, the reality that, and he's outraising Hillary Clinton right now 2-1. Think about that. But what's amazing about that is his money comes in chunks of $5, $10, $25 from millions of people that have a vision for this country that I share, that you share. I do believe in universal health care. I do believe in much of what Bernie Sanders is talking about. I do believe that we need to tax Wall Street. I do believe that there are really billions upon billions of dollars out there that have been pushed to the top. Not the top 1%, but the top 25%. And that when we talk, Z, about paying our fair share, it's not happening. And Bernie Sanders, with the right Congress, could change the world. Literally could change the world. Now I'll yield to the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Well, and here's the interesting thing, too, is from the 17th to the 20th of this month, CNN and ORC conducted a poll of, candidate versus candidate. And Ted Cruz is actually the only, well, let me put it this way. Bernie Sanders beats Trump, Cruz, and Kasich Hillary Clinton also beats Trump, Cruz, and Kasich in this poll, with the exception, and this is within a 3% margin of error, with the exception of Ted Cruz, in which she ties and he beats him by over 10 points. Okay? So in this poll, against Ted Cruz, you have Bernie Sanders with 55 to 42, and Hillary Clinton versus Ted Cruz is 48 to 48%. All the other polls, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders both beat Trump and Kasich in a possible runoff. Bernie Sanders by a higher number, again with a 3% margin of error, than Hillary Clinton. So in all of these scenarios, Bernie Sanders beats the three GOP nominees, and Hillary Clinton ties Ted Cruz. So, and I know what we think about polls and things, but there we have it. And the problem I have too, and I have this problem with Democrats, is the ones who are saying that if Bernie Sanders isn't nominated, that they're just not going to vote, and that they won't vote for Hillary Clinton under any circumstances. And that's a very dangerous tactic to take right now. Too dangerous for this.
It's and again, we can take a look at those polls. I looked at some polls this morning from Real Clear Politics, and at some level, we do let that guide us. I'll admit that, although after Michigan, not as much. And it's fascinating to watch all of this play out. At the end of the day, I hope that no matter who the nominee is on the Democratic side, that we will come together. I know you watch social media probably more than I do, but there are two definitive camps. There's the pro-Bernie camp, there's the pro-Hillary camp, and there are very few people in the middle. And that's made me a little bit uncomfortable, to be honest with you.
And that's kind of where. Go ahead.
No, go on.
Well, and that's kind of where this Bill Clinton remark comes in, because what was happening on social media as a result of this, of a speech that he gave in Phoenix, is really worth talking about on the same in the same kind of vein that we're talking about things right now.
All right, go ahead and shoot that, because I'm hoping that we can get to the Donald Trump supporters audio, but if not, we'll do it for sure tomorrow.
Yeah, because that one's pretty long. But here's Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
I literally, from the time I met her 45 years ago till we talked yesterday, she is the best change maker I have ever known. She always finds a way to make something good happen, to make people feel empowered, to buy people into the process, to make democracy work the way the framers intended for it to work. Now, if you don't believe we can all grow together again, if you don't believe we're ever going to grow again, if you believe it's more important to relitigate the past, there may be many reasons that you don't want to support her. But if you believe we can all rise together, if you believe we've finally come to the point where we can put the awful legacy of the last 8 years behind us and the 7 years before that, when we were practicing trickle-down economics and no regulation in Washington, which is what caused the crash, then you should vote for her, because she's the only person who basically has good ideas, will tell you how she's going to pay for them, can be commander-in-chief, and is a proven change maker with Republicans and Democrats and independents alike.
So here's the thing, and because you said I pay attention to social media. I had originally seen this on Facebook. I went to the website that had posted it. It was a conservative website. While I'm listening to this, and I'm reading the notes and the article as I'm listening to it, my first thought was that this was a speech taken from 2008 that he gave in defense of his wife, and coming after which listening to it now makes no sense because he mentions the crash of 2009. But at the time, that's what I was thinking. And so I went back. I looked up the posting on YouTube where it was, where the speech was taken from. It was from, in fact, this week. And, and then I was like, well, why would he say something like that? And then I started reading Democrats, progressive postings and groups on Facebook slamming him for saying this and attributing his comments to he was referring to Obama, and then looked at. I'm sorry, I think the speech was given in Washington because I found one from one of the Seattle newspapers, and the comment he made, according to him, he was referring to Congress, to 8 years of Republican Congress, and eight years prior to that of failed economic policies and things along those lines. So he's referring to a GOP right now for the past 8 years that has been obstructionist, and then 8 years prior to that of George W. Bush. And I'll take that. I'll take that, just assuming that that's what he meant, that he was referring to Congress and the GOP, and we'll take that at face value. But here's what I really don't like, is that progressive groups are putting headlines on this video that he is slamming Obama's legacy for the last 8 years in this speech. And this is what I don't like about politics in this country right now, because what he said, what he meant to say, what he really was referring to is being renamed in order to make her look bad in the runoff on Bernie Sanders, where we all know that she's going to get the nomination. And now, a couple of months down the road, Republicans are going to be able to say, well, look, even the Democrats were saying that she hated Obama. And this is the kind of nasty crap that we start getting into.
Yeah, and it's and again, I'm not going to disagree with a word that you said. And clearly, that divide exists, and people love to jump all over this stuff. Let's be honest about it. The vast majority of people will say progressive, will say Democrats, will say whatever you want to say, but the vast majority of them don't want to hear the explanation. They would rather create their own version of the fairy tale. And you're right, that is sad.
Well, and this happens over and over and over again, where even major news, outlets that a lot of progressives read are putting that label on it without going back and saying, well, what did he really mean, right? And it wasn't that hard, Tony. I mean, all I had to do was look up, Bill Clinton's comment in local newspapers where he gave the speech and realize that, of course, he was asked the question. Of course, he was confronted with what he had said, and he gave an explanation. But other outlets are perfectly happy with running with, oh, he's slamming Obama's last 8 years as president and his failed policies because, that's what he does. And granted, the Clinton campaign has played some dirty politics over the last year. They've been very unfair in some of their comments. But, let's at least be honest in our assessment and where we're getting our information from and what people really said. Because this whole idea of putting words in people's mouths is a great tactic from the right, and they've used it over and over and over again, and they've ended up with Donald Trump. So do we really want to be put in the same position?
Absolutely not. Well, which is our transition to let's put in people's minds what we want them to know about TNZ Talk.
We do, and everything that they could possibly want to know can be found at tnztalk.com. And I would urge people to go to our support page and find out how they can support us by going to iTunes, going to all different kinds of places, rating and reviewing us. This has turned into a major campaign on our part of begging, asking, pleading with people to please go to iTunes, rate us. It's a little convoluted, so I even created a video that shows you how to do it, because Apple, for all of their intensive work on being user-friendly, does not make this... I don't want to say they don't make it easy, but it's not intuitive as you would expect for something to Apple to be. So if you are on iTunes, please find us, review us, download our podcast so that iTunes can promote us and more people can find us and we can stay here and do what we love to do for even longer, and you can listen to us till the end of time. Tony?
Wow, the end of time. Well, speak of the end of time, we are at the end of time for today's show anyway. Tomorrow, we'll, of course, break down the primaries, any news coming out of Brussels. You'll hear it here. Any news coming out of Havana, you'll hear it here. And you'll also hear Trump supporters. We're going to play that audio tomorrow. Folks, you've never heard anything quite like this. Again, our thanks to everybody at Blog Talk USA, Ron Spikes, Rihanna, and the entire team that make this possible. For Richard Zombeck, I'm Tony Trupiano, and as always, we ask that you be well.
Oh yeah, can you feel it? Just over the credits, just riffing now. Words and chords. Not the poetry and the real thing, but not bad for an ad-lib. Not good, but... It's not long enough, so just do a little bit more, and that's nearly done. That's the final credit there. That's the end.